picture this scenario for a second. You're 19 years old, right?
Okay, 19.
Yeah, and you're working a late shift in a totally ordinary, brightly lit supermarket somewhere in the UK.
Just a standard, boring grocery store.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the kind of place you've walked into 100 times without a second thought. The fluorescent lights are humming that, that low, irritating buzz.
Oh, I know the exact sound. It drives you crazy.
Right. And the air smells vaguely of cardboard and, like, industrial floor cleaner. You're just trying to get through the night.
Just counting down the hours.
Exactly. So you're taking your break in the upstairs staff room. You're completely alone, just eating a sad little sandwich.
As you do on a night shift.
Yeah. And suddenly you hear a massive, booming, banging sound, just echoing from the dark, empty warehouse right next door.
Oh, no. I hate this already.
Right. Now, you know for a fact you are supposed to be the only person up there. So you cautiously step out into the hallway, expecting the motion sensor lights in the warehouse to, click on.
But they don't, do they?
They don't.
Yep.
You peer into this absolute pitch blackness, and your eyes adjust just enough to see him. It's a man.
Okay.
6'4", bushy black beard, wearing a red checkered shirt. But as you look closer, your brain just sort of short circuits.
Bit way.
He has no legs from the thighs down. He is just floating there. His eyes are solid black pools, completely devoid of anything human.
That's terrifying.
It gets worse. His mouth stretches open into this sickening, unnatural, puppet-like grin, and thick black gunk starts violently pouring out of his mouth and down his shirt.
Oh, wow. That's the absolute definition of a waking nightmare.
It really is.
And, what makes that specific account so deeply unsettling to me isn't just the visceral horror of the entity itself, though that is horrific.
Right.
It's the violation of the environment. You are taking the most mundane, predictable, intensely boring environment imaginable, a supermarket stockroom, and you are completely shattering the fundamental laws of reality within it.
Because you don't expect it there.
Exactly. There's no Gothic castle, no swirling fog. It's happening next to, pallets of frozen peas.
Yeah.
And the psychological fallout of that is just profound.
That violation of the mundane is exactly where we are going today. So welcome to our deep dive.
I'm very excited for this one.
Me too. We are taking a massive stack of source material today to explore the world of the unexplained, but we're doing it through a very specific and frankly surprising lens.
Yeah, a very unique perspective.
We're looking at the work of Peter Laws, specifically his YouTube and podcast series, Into the Fog.
The materials we pulled for this offer an incredibly rich tapestry. We have transcripts from his actual investigation.
And they are so detailed.
Incredibly well-researched.
Mm-hmm.
We've got multi-layered hauntings in Kentucky, Indiana, Northumberland, and, of course, that UK supermarket you just painted a terrifying picture of.
But it's not just the spooky stories we're looking at, right?
No, beyond that, we're drawing from an extensive interview he gave on the Supernatural Japan podcast. We've also scraped Reddit to analyze how audiences are responding to his very specific style.
Which is fascinating in itself.
It really is. And we pulled audio snippets from other true crime shows to create a baseline for comparison. Plus, we reviewed the evolution of his entire catalog. Going back to his previous show, Frightful.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out the why and the how behind his approach. Because, on paper, this guy makes no sense.
He really doesn't fit the mold.
Not at all. We want to understand how a former Christian church minister became one of the leading, most empathetic voices in the paranormal space.
It's quite the career pivot.
And we're going to unpack his argument that your morbid curiosity, like the part of you that wants to hear about that legless man in the supermarket, is actually a highly evolved, healthy survival mechanism.
Yes, that part is so interesting.
And most importantly, we're going to look at how his storytelling style takes these impossible supernatural claims and anchors them in a deep, unwavering human empathy.
It's that pivot that really caught my attention.
Yeah.
Because moving from the pulpit to the paranormal is not a standard trajectory.
No, definitely not.
So Peter Laws actually grew up on the east coast of Canada.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, a place that is already completely steeped in Irish and Scottish folklore. He grew up surrounded by tales of giants, fairies, the harsh superstitions of the sea.
That makes a lot of sense, having that foundation.
But he didn't stay there. He spent 24 years living across Asia. We're talking Japan, South Korea, China, Malaysia.
Wow, 24 years. That's a massive chunk of time.
Right. So he is someone who has systematically absorbed the mythologies, the cultural anxieties, and the ghost stories of multiple continents. Today, he lives in the UK, writes for the highly respected 14 times, and if you follow paranormal media, you know him as the recurring voice of Teen Believer on the BBC's hit show Uncanny.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because the paradox of his background is kind of the elephant in the room
The
here.
minister thing.
Yeah, he is a former Christian minister. The immediate assumption, like the stereotype, is that someone whose entire life and education is rooted in, the light, the divine, the holy, they should be actively avoiding the dark, the macabre, and the occult.
That is exactly what you would expect.
If his job was essentially to banish demons and focus on salvation, how does he end up spending his days meticulously researching floating severed heads, demonic entities, and true crime tragedies? It feels like a massive contradiction.
He's actually incredibly self-aware about that contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
He addresses it head-on in a nonfiction book he wrote called The Frighteners: Why We Love Monsters, Ghosts, Death, and Gore.
Oh, I love that title.
It's great. He completely flips the script on how we view dark media. His core thesis is that being drawn to the dark, to the scary, isn't a sign of moral decay or spiritual sickness at all.
Wait, really? Because a lot of people would argue the opposite.
They would, but he argues it is a vital, necessary, and perfectly healthy part of human culture. He says that spooky stories give us a controlled, safe environment to reflect on the things that absolutely paralyze us with fear in the real world.
Like death and the unknown.
Exactly. Death, random violence. It lets our fragile psyches actually process those concepts without breaking.
He uses this analogy in the Supernatural Japan interview that completely reframed this for me.
Oh, the car crash one.
Yes. He talks about the universal experience of driving down a motorway and passing a horrific car crash. Traffic slows down, and despite knowing it's going to be gruesome, something in your brain compels you to look.
We've all done it.
Right. Now, your emotional center, like your heart, may be screaming at you. Why are you staring at someone else's tragedy? What kind of sick, twisted person are you?
It's the classic guilt of the rubberneck. We've all felt that shame.
Exactly. But here is where it gets fascinating. He says your head, the cold, logical, ancient survival mechanism in your brain, is overriding your manners.
It's looking for data.
Yes. Your head is saying, listen, we are not enjoying this. We are desperately gathering gnawing information. We look at the twisted metal because our primal brain needs to know exactly what went wrong.
To avoid doing it ourselves.
Right. We are studying the failure so we don't make the exact same mistake and end up dead. He argues that horror and true crime, essentially, shock us into wisdom.
It is a brilliant evolutionary perspective. Think about your behavior immediately after seeing that crash. For the next 20 miles, what do?
I drive like a grandma.
Exactly. You slow down. You instinctively put both hands on the wheel.
Yeah.
You check your mirrors twice as often.
Yeah.
You are hypervigilant.
That makes total sense.
Scary stories, folklore, the paranormal, they function in the exact same psychological way. They're the evolutionary warning signs passed down through generations.
Like the old fairy tales.
Exactly. The fairy tale says, don't go into the dark woods at night because a goblin will eat you. Now, the goblin might be completely mythical, but the very real danger of hypothermia, wolves, or getting lost is not.
So the monster is just a vehicle for the survival data.
Precisely.
That makes me think of it almost like a vaccine for the soul.
Oh, I like that phrasing.
Because a vaccine gives you a dead or weakened version of a virus, so your immune system can practice fighting it without actually dying. Laws is saying that listening to a story about a demonic haunting or a serial killer is a controlled, weakened dose of true terror.
You hit the nail on the head.
You get to practice feeling fear, navigating dread, and surviving it, all from the safety of your couch.
I think that vaccine analogy is spot on. And if you view it through that lens, his background as a minister suddenly isn't a paradox at all. It's a perfectly logical foundation.
How so?
Well, he's functioning as a translator. He takes the intense, often taboo, deeply misunderstood world of horror and the paranormal, and he translates it into a language of psychological safety and empathy.
Which is something the paranormal community desperately needs. The internet is just full of people who want to point and laugh or call someone a liar. But Laws treats this work like a pastoral mission.
He literally uses the phrase pastoral feeling to describe his approach. He looks at people who are often marginalized horror movie buffs, kids who are obsessed with violent video games, adults who listen to aggressive heavy metal.
They're outcasts.
Yeah. These are people who are constantly told by mainstream society and especially by strict religious communities that there is something inherently broken, twisted, or even demonic about them for liking those things.
That's got to be so alienating.
It is. What Peter Laws does, he virtually puts a hand on their shoulder and says, There is nothing wrong with you. You are engaging in a deeply human, incredibly ancient practice of confronting your own mortality.
It's incredibly validating, and that pastoral desire to comfort the misunderstood, that instinct to listen rather than judge, directly fuels the entire methodology of how Into the Fog operates, and how he treats the witnesses who come to him with these impossible stories.
Let's look closely at the architecture of Into the Fog, because it stands in stark contrast to like 90% of the paranormal content you find online today.
Okay.
It is definitively not a debunking channel. He isn't out there with a skeptical sneer trying to catch terrified people in lies or find the fishing line attached to a flying teacup to prove how smart he is.
Right.
He is incredibly grounded. He will absolutely offer balanced, rational, mundane possibilities if they fit the scenario. But his ultimate allegiance is to the empathy of the witness.
Because he understands that whether the ghost is a literal, objective reality or a complex psychological manifestation, the sheer trauma of the experience is 100% real to the person living it.
It still leaves a scar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He refuses to brush over the psychological damage of having your reality broken. There's this fantastic example he gives about his storytelling style that really stuck with me.
The sideboard one.
Yes, the sideboard analogy. So if a witness writes in and says, I was sitting in my living room, totally alone, and my heavy oak side table suddenly moved 5 inches across the carpet all by itself.
Creepy, but kind of standard.
Right, and most podcast hosts would just read that line off a script, maybe add a spooky creaking sound effect and move on to the next scare.
But Laws stops the narrative completely. He will literally get out a physical measuring tape in his own home.
He actually gets out a tape measure.
Yes. He takes the camera, he goes to his own heavy living room sideboard, he places the measuring tape on the floor, and he physically drags his own furniture exactly 5 inches.
Oh, wow.
He shows the audience the physical space, the awkward weight of the furniture, the sound it makes against the floor, and he says, look at this distance. It doesn't sound like much on paper. But imagine sitting alone in the dead of night in the safety of your own home and watching this physical object defy the laws of physics right in front of your eyes.
That completely changes how you visualize it.
It forces the viewer out of the role of passive consumer and into the shoes of the terrified witness. And if you look at the Reddit sources discussing his channel, that specific empathetic approach is exactly what audiences are connecting with.
What are they saying on Reddit?
Users constantly highlight this quality. They describe his channel as having a nice, chill vibe, which sounds counterintuitive for a show about demons and true crime.
Yeah, chill is not the word I'd use for a legless ghost.
But one user summarized it perfectly. They said listening to him feels like talking in the pub with someone telling a hell of a story. It's not just that creepy, soulless copy pasta text slapped over generic B-roll footage. It's personal, it's charming, and it's deeply human.
And he took that whole concept of community building to a completely surreal, incredible level during the pandemic lockdowns. He started a project called the Creepy Cove Community Church.
Oh, this was a fascinating sociological experiment. I loved reading about this.
It really was. So picture the height of lockdown. Everyone is trapped inside. Laws noticed that horror fans, the exact kind of outcasts we were just talking about, were feeling incredibly dangerously isolated.
Because they didn't have a built-in community.
Exactly. They didn't have the pre-existing support structures that traditional religious groups had. If you belonged to a massive church, you were instantly hopping on Zoom for Sunday services, Bible studies, fellowship. You had a net catching you.
Right. The horror community didn't have that infrastructure.
So Laws, using his pastoral background, simply invented a fictional secular church for them.
And he set it in a made-up coastal town where all horror movie tropes are just accepted as everyday reality.
The world building is just absurdly delightful. He would do these audio broadcasts where the community announcements included things like, Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th running the Thursday morning Keep Fit classes down at the rec center.
Hilarious.
Or Jack Torrance from The Shining stepping in to play King Herod in the church nativity play. It sounds like pure comedy, but beneath that campy, spooky veneer, he was doing real pastoral work.
He was delivering actual heartfelt sermons on mental well-being, dealing with anxiety, and coping with the crushing loneliness of the pandemic.
Wow.
He was writing and recording original horror hymns that they could all sing along to. He essentially built a completely safe, non-judgmental space for outsiders to gather, process their collective trauma, and feel part of a community. And all without any religious dogma or conversion tactics being pushed on them.
It just proves how versatile his empathetic approach is. But I want to pivot slightly, because if we compare his approach to standard true crime media, the difference is jarring.
Oh, completely night and day.
In our source stack, we have this audio snippet from a show called True Crime Brewery, and they are discussing a real case from Nixa, Missouri, involving a young woman named Jackie Johns.
That's a heavy case.
Very heavy, and the tone of that excerpt is incredibly intense. It's all about community-wide panic, the outrage of the citizens, the desperate, crushing pressure on the local police force, the existential fear of the lead detective dying of old age before he could solve the case. It is macro-level societal panic.
Right. It's the sensationalism of the ripple effect. Standard true crime often zooms out to look at how a tragedy fractures a town, which is a valid way to tell a story, but it often loses the humanity of the victim in the process.
It becomes about the spectacle.
Exactly. Laws does the exact opposite. He dramatically shifts the genre's focus by zooming all the way in. He zeroes in on the survivor's internal microscopic trauma.
So he ignores the big picture panic.
He doesn't care about what the mayor of the town thinks. He cares about the guy standing in the supermarket warehouse trying to process a legless man, or the family huddled in a living room while unseen forces tear their house apart.
That's so much more terrifying, honestly.
By moving away from the sensational macro level, he makes the horror profoundly intimate. And frankly, intimate horror is infinitely more terrifying because it's something any of us could experience tomorrow.
And he doesn't just limit this deep empathy to Western Judeo-Christian experiences. He is intensely aware of how cultural lenses shape our fear.
Yes, the Supernatural Japan interview highlights this so well.
He goes on this deep dive into his love for Japanese horror manga, specifically the work of Junji Ito. If you haven't read Tomi or Uzumaki, it is, well, it's a lot.
Junji Ito is the undisputed king of body horror. But it's a very specific, surreal type of body horror.
Utterly terrifying.
Yeah.
Laws points out how Ito taps into specific phobias that wouldn't necessarily even occur to a Western mind conditioned by vampires and werewolves.
Like what?
Well, Ito writes about the specific, agonizing horror of tiny, thread-like hairs growing uncontrollably inside the folds of a human brain.
Oh, God.
Or massive, rotting mechanical fish developing spider-like legs and walking out of the ocean onto the shore, spreading a death-stench disease.
That is deeply unpleasant.
Laws argues that as a researcher, venturing completely outside your classic country of origin for paranormal stories is essential because it gives you a freshness to the fear. You don't know the rules of the monster anymore.
Because cultural unfamiliarity inherently breeds a very primal kind of fear. He gives a brilliant, personal, and somewhat embarrassing example of this from his own youth.
Oh, the Exorcist story.
Yeah. So when he was a teenager growing up in rural Canada, his entire spooky vocabulary was ghosts, demons, and Irish banshees. One night, he finally watched the classic 1970s film The Exorcist for the very first time.
A terrifying movie regardless of your background.
Truly. Now, the film famously opens with this sun-drenched, dusty archaeological dig in Iraq. During that sequence, there was a scene featuring the Islamic call to prayer echoing loudly over the city. Laws admitted that as a Canadian kid, having never heard that sound before in his life, he was absolutely terrified by it.
He assumed it was some kind of sinister demonic chant designed to summon the devil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he points out how ridiculous that is in hindsight. It is a perfectly holy, beautiful, deeply revered religious practice for millions of people. It has nothing to do with the demonic possession that happens later in the film.
But because he didn't know that.
Simply because the sound was entirely foreign to his ears, his primal brain processed the unfamiliarity as an immediate, visceral threat.
Which perfectly sets up this incredibly subtle, insidious story he shared about a tourist named Bernard staying in a Kyoto Airbnb.
This story gives me the creeps.
This isn't a story with a giant monster or a bloody climax, but it is one of those stories that just burrows under your skin and stays there. So Bernard and his friends are traveling through Japan, and they rent this two-story house in Kyoto. Now, Laws provides a crucial piece of geographical context here. The house is located in an area that historically was known as a Burakumin area.
Yes, and we really need to pause and provide the sociological context there because it informs the entire atmosphere.
Right.
In Japanese history, the Burakumin were an outcast group, forced to live at the very bottom of the traditional social order. They were historically associated with industries that were considered unclean or connected to death executioners, butchers, tanners, gravediggers.
It's a lot of heavy history.
Very heavy. It is a very dark, oppressive part of history that carries a massive amount of cultural weight, spiritual stigma, and lingering marginalization, even in modern times. So the soil this house is built on is already conceptually heavy.
Right. So Bernard and his friends arrive at this house. It is September in Kyoto, which if you've been, you know, is incredibly hot, sticky, and overwhelmingly humid.
Unbearable heat.
But the moment they step through the front door of this house, the temperature plummets. The house is freezing cold, and it has this incredibly heavy, still suffocating atmosphere. To get to the upstairs bedrooms, they have to climb these terrifyingly steep, almost vertical, traditional wooden stairs.
And that physical detail is paramount. You cannot run up and down those stairs quietly or quickly. It requires effort, balance, and it makes noise.
Exactly. You have to be deliberate. So they get settled. At one point, Bernard is the absolute last person upstairs. Everyone else has gone down to load up their van outside. Bernard packs his things. He has his little sling bag. He neatly drapes his zip-up hoodie over the strap of the bag.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And inside the bag, which is zipped shut, is his Nintendo DS inside its protective carrying case. He carries this down those steep stairs, walks outside, and joins his friends at the van. They're getting ready to leave when Bernard looks down and realizes his hoodie is gone. It must have slipped off the bag somewhere inside the house.
And logically, he assumes it just slid off his shoulder and is lying in a crumpled heap on the floor somewhere between the front door and his bedroom.
Right. The most mundane explanation possible. And he is 100% certain, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was the last living person inside that house. He runs back inside, hurries up those steep, loud wooden stairs, walks into his bedroom, and stops dead in his tracks.
Because it's not on the floor.
His hoodie is not in a crumpled heap on the floor. His hoodie has been perfectly, meticulously folded, and it is resting up on the windowsill across the room.
Oh, that is so unnerving.
But that's not even the worst part. On a shelf nearby, there was a row of traditional Japanese dolls. When he left the room 2 minutes ago, every single one of those dolls had been facing the wall. Now, they had all been completely turned around, and they were staring directly at the doorway. Directly at him.
It's the precision of it that is so deeply upsetting.
And the absolute cherry on top of this nightmare. He looks closer at the folded hoodie. Resting perfectly on top of it, sitting right in front of the staring dolls, is his Nintendo DS case. The case that had been securely zipped inside his bag, which was currently hanging off his shoulder.
See, I want to pause here and really analyze why this narrative is so incredibly effective. Because it lacks everything we expect from a horror movie. There is no loud music sting. No monster jumps out of the closet. The walls don't bleed.
Oh, it's totally quiet.
But Bernard is left standing in that room, facing an impossible, reality-breaking physics problem. The parameters of the situation dictate only two possible realities. Reality A. His friends orchestrated a highly elaborate, physically impossible trick where they silently bypassed him on those steep wooden stairs, unzipped his bag without him feeling it, folded his shirt, rotated the dolls, and vanished, all in a matter of seconds.
Which is absurd.
Or reality B, there is an invisible, intelligent, highly capable entity standing in that room with him.
And reality B means everything you know about the universe is a lie. Which brings us to perhaps the most compelling philosophical concept Peter Laws talks about in these sources. He calls it the privilege of non-belief.
That is such a powerful, loaded phrase. The privilege of non-belief.
It is brilliant because it is so true. Think about it. If you have never experienced anything paranormal, there is a very comfortable, slightly arrogant safety in your worldview. You can listen to this deep dive, you can watch ghost hunting shows, and you can comfortably sit back and think, well, that's just a spooky campfire story. Those people are either hallucinating, they're desperate for attention, or they were just plain stupid. You are insulated by rationality.
You feel safe.
But Laws points out that the moment you see the impossible, the exact second you are the guy standing in a freezing room staring at a folded hoodie and a DS case that physically, mathematically cannot be there, you are violently flung out of that safety. You lose your privilege.
Your entire paradigm of reality collapses in on itself. And Laws is so empathetic to what happens next, which is the secondary trauma of the paranormal. The ghost didn't physically hurt Bernard, but the secondary trauma kicks in immediately. You start profoundly questioning your own sanity. Am I losing my mind? Am I developing a neurological condition?
That's terrifying on its own.
And the worst part is the isolation. You realize that if you go home and tell your boss, your spouse, or your friends that a ghost stole your Nintendo, you're going to be instantly labeled a lunatic. You gain the terrifying burden of the unexplained, and you have to carry it completely alone.
You are exiled from the rational world, and that exact sense of terrifying